I fell asleep and woke up at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And he's 400 miles away in a hotel in Virginia.
Holy crap. If she think I'm cheating on her, so why she stay with me? Let's broke up. I'm so close to finish my relationship, to be honest with you.
At first, Rebecca and Zied did not look like a couple walking toward collapse because their story had already survived the kind of pressure that usually breaks international romances before they even reach marriage. They had distance between them, a major age gap hanging over every conversation, cultural differences that fans kept debating, family concerns that never fully disappeared, and the constant pressure of being watched by millions of people who thought they understood every private moment from a few edited scenes on television. For a long time, that made them look stronger, not weaker, because every time doubt appeared, they seemed to push through it, smile through it, and prove that their relationship was not just another reality TV relationship built for drama. But the quiet problem with a couple like Rebecca and Zied is that survival can sometimes look exactly like healing from the outside, even when the same wounds are still sitting underneath the marriage, waiting for one wrong moment to open again. Rebecca had entered the relationship carrying old fears, old disappointments, and the kind of emotional history that does not disappear just because someone new says the right things. She had been married before, she had been hurt before, and she had already lived through the kind of trust problems that make a person watch small changes more carefully than other people would. That is why her story with Zied was never just about romance across countries, or a woman from America falling for a younger man from Tunisia, or a couple trying to prove critics wrong. It was also about what happens when someone wants to believe again, but cannot fully silence the part of themselves that keeps searching for signs something is wrong. Rebecca wanted love to feel safe, but her own past had trained her to look for danger, and that tension became one of the biggest shadows over their marriage. Zied entered the relationship with his own pressures, because he was not just stepping into a marriage, he was stepping into a new country, a new lifestyle, a new public identity, and a relationship where every small choice could be judged as either love, control, distance, or betrayal. At the beginning, the difference between them made the story feel exciting because fans could see two people trying to build something across culture, language, age, and expectation. But after marriage, the same differences that once made their story feel dramatic started becoming daily problems. And daily problems do not need one explosive scandal to become dangerous. They become dangerous because they repeat quietly and relentlessly until two people wake up one day and realize they are not fighting about one issue anymore. They are fighting about the whole shape of the life they built together. The age gap was always the easiest thing for people to talk about because it was visible, simple, and perfect for online judgment. Rebecca was older, Zied was younger, and fans never stopped questioning what that meant for their future, their chemistry, their power balance, and their insecurities. But the age gap alone was never the full problem because plenty of couples survive age differences when trust, communication, and respect are strong. The more serious issue was what the age gap represented inside the relationship, especially when Zied started changing, growing more independent, settling into his life, and becoming less dependent on Rebecca's guidance. For Rebecca, that shift may have looked like distance, while for Zied, it may have felt like finally becoming his own person in America. That is where the emotional damage started getting more complicated, because one person's independence can feel like abandonment to someone who is already afraid of being replaced. When viewers saw Rebecca worrying about Zied's behavior, it was easy to reduce it to jealousy, insecurity, or control. But the deeper truth was more uncomfortable. Rebecca was not just reacting to a young husband going to the gym, dressing differently, using his phone more privately, or spending time away from her. She was reacting to a pattern her mind believed it recognized, because past betrayal can make ordinary distance feel like proof, even before proof exists. That does not automatically mean Rebecca was right about every fear, and it does not automatically mean Zied was innocent of every emotional failure. It means their marriage had reached the kind of place where even normal behavior could no longer be interpreted normally because trust had already become too fragile to hold the weight of everyday life. The first brutal truth is that Rebecca and Zied's marriage did not seem to break because of one single moment. It seemed to weaken through repetition, through the same arguments returning with new faces, through suspicion followed by defensiveness, through distance followed by panic, through reconciliation followed by no real resolution. That cycle is exhausting to watch because it is exhausting to live, and it creates a relationship where both people start performing roles instead of actually listening. Rebecca becomes the one who questions, watches, worries, and demands answers. Zied becomes the one who withdraws, defends himself, gets tired of being accused, and pulls away even more. Then his distance makes Rebecca more suspicious, and her suspicion makes him more distant. The marriage becomes a machine that keeps producing the same pain. That is why their return on the last resort felt heavier than a normal reality TV comeback. They were not returning as a couple with one messy argument that needed cleaning up. They were returning as a couple that had been living with tension for years. And the official framing around their story made it clear that this was not just a tiny misunderstanding being stretched for television. Their issues included culture, religion, their 22-year age gap, cheating accusations, distance, reconciliation without resolution, and a move to Tampa that was supposed to help but apparently made things worse. That detail matters because Tampa was not just a location change. It was supposed to be a restart button. When a couple moves for a fresh start and ends up more disconnected, that says something painful about the relationship because it means the problem was never only the environment. The problem came with them. A new city can distract people from old resentment for a little while, but it cannot erase the pattern that already exists between them. For Rebecca and Zied, Tampa appears to have become the place where unresolved issues followed them into a different home, a different routine, and a different version of the same emotional distance. They hoped a fresh start would create a fresh marriage, but instead, the distance reportedly grew worse, and the image of them living separate lives under the same roof became one of the most brutal parts of the story. There are few things lonelier than being married to someone who is physically close but emotionally unreachable, because from the outside, people still see a couple, while inside the house, both people may feel completely alone. That kind of distance does not always look dramatic on camera. Sometimes it looks like different sleep schedules, quiet meals, separate routines, phone silence, awkward conversations, or one person wanting closeness while the other wants peace. It can look boring from the outside, but it is emotionally brutal because it turns marriage into a waiting room. One person waits for affection, the other waits for the fighting to stop, and neither person feels seen. Rebecca seemed to want reassurance that she was still wanted, still chosen, still safe, and still enough. Zied seemed to want room to breathe without every movement becoming evidence against him. Both needs can be real at the same time, but when a couple has lost trust, even real needs start sounding like attacks. The cheating accusations became the loudest part of the story, because cheating is the kind of word that instantly makes viewers choose sides. The moment cheating enters the conversation, fans start scanning every scene like detectives, looking for guilt, denial, insecurity, or proof. But the more interesting issue is not just whether something happened. The more interesting issue is how the accusation itself changes the marriage. Once one partner believes betrayal may be happening, the relationship becomes a courtroom where every action needs explaining. A late message becomes suspicious. A new outfit becomes suspicious. Time away from home becomes suspicious. A quiet mood becomes suspicious. Even honesty starts sounding rehearsed because the person listening no longer feels safe enough to believe it. Rebecca's private investigator background made that dynamic even more intense because fans already knew she was not someone who would easily ignore small details. That background became part of how viewers understood her suspicion, and it also made the storyline feel sharper because she was not simply portrayed as someone guessing in the dark. She knew what signs to look for, or at least believed she did, and that made every conversation with Zied feel like it carried extra weight. But that same skill can become dangerous inside a marriage if every emotional shift starts being treated like a case file. A relationship cannot breathe when one partner feels constantly investigated, and a frightened partner cannot relax when the other person's behavior keeps triggering old alarms. This is where the story moves from sad to more uncomfortable, because neither person has to be a cartoon villain for the relationship to become painful. Rebecca can be genuinely hurt and still become overwhelming in the way she searches for reassurance. Zied can be genuinely tired of accusations and still fail to understand how his distance feeds the fear. The problem with online fan culture is that it wants one monster and one victim, because that makes the story easier to argue about in comment sections. But Rebecca and Zied's situation looks more like two people locked inside a cycle that punishes both of them, while the audience keeps demanding a cleaner answer than real life usually provides. Fans became divided because Rebecca's pain is easy to understand, but her reactions are not always easy for everyone to watch. Some viewers see a woman who has been through enough disappointment to recognize warning signs before they become disasters. They see someone who is scared of losing the marriage she fought so hard to defend, and they understand why Zied's emotional distance would feel terrifying. Other viewers see a woman who may be letting insecurity take control, especially when suspicion becomes the center of every scene. They believe the constant questioning makes Zied withdraw, and then his withdrawal becomes the next reason Rebecca questions him again. The disagreement among fans is not just about one couple. It is about how much suspicion a marriage can survive before the suspicion becomes its own form of damage. Zied's position is also complicated because viewers have watched him become more comfortable in America over time, and that change can be read in two completely different ways. One side may see it as growth, confidence, and independence, especially for someone who left his home country and had to build a new life. Another side may see it as emotional escape, as if he needed Rebecca more in the beginning and now does not show the same urgency to protect the relationship. That is a brutal shift for any partner to feel, because it creates the fear that the love was strongest when the other person needed something. Once the need disappears, the affection starts looking different, and the person left behind starts wondering whether they were loved or simply useful during the hardest transition. That fear is one of the most painful parts of Rebecca's side of the story, because she did not just date Zied casually. She brought him into her life, defended the relationship against criticism, handled the judgment that came with their age gap, and allowed millions of viewers to watch the most vulnerable parts of her hope. When a person invests that much emotionally, they do not only fear losing the partner, they fear looking foolish for believing in the first place. Public relationships make that fear even sharper because the breakup is never just private heartbreak. It becomes content, commentary, reaction clips, Reddit threads, headlines, and strangers casually deciding who deserved what from a relationship they never had to live inside. That public pressure matters because reality TV couples do not just fight with each other. They fight with the version of themselves that fans think they know. Rebecca has been praised, criticized, defended, mocked, and analyzed by people who see fragments of her life and turn them into full judgments. Zied has been treated the same way, with viewers debating whether he is distant, misunderstood, immature, checked out, or simply exhausted. The problem is that once a couple becomes a franchise storyline, normal marital pain becomes entertainment currency. Their worst conversations become the most valuable scenes. Their breakdowns become previews. Their tears become thumbnails. Their unresolved issues become weekly debate material. That does something to a relationship, even if nobody wants to admit it. The castle setting of The Last Resort made the whole thing feel even more dramatic, because there is something strangely cruel about putting broken couples in a beautiful place and asking them to decide whether love can survive. The setting looks romantic, but the emotional reality is not romantic at all. A castle cannot soften the fact that some couples arrive already exhausted, already resentful, and already unsure whether they are fighting for love or fighting because they are afraid to let go. For Rebecca and Zied, the retreat was framed as a final chance, not a simple vacation, and that changes the stakes. When a couple enters therapy with the word final hanging over them, every conversation starts carrying the weight of a possible ending. The therapy environment forces a couple to say things they may have avoided at home, but it also removes their ability to hide behind normal routines. At home, people can dodge conflict by going to work, scrolling their phone, sleeping in another room, running errands, or pretending tomorrow will be better. In a retreat, the problems are placed in the center of the room and everyone is expected to look at them. That can be healing for couples who are ready to be honest, but it can be brutal for couples who are already defensive. Rebecca and Zied were not just being asked whether they loved each other. They were being asked whether love was still enough after years of mistrust, distance, cultural friction, and emotional fatigue. The less brutal version of their story is that they are two people who love each other but struggle to understand each other. That version is still possible, and it is the version fans who support them probably want to believe. In that version, Rebecca's suspicion comes from fear, Zied's distance comes from frustration. And both people still have enough affection left to rebuild if they can finally stop repeating the same pattern. It is a painful but hopeful version because it suggests that their biggest enemy is not betrayal. Their biggest enemy is poor communication, old wounds, and the inability to turn conflict into repair. Plenty of couples survive that if both people are willing to change, not just apologize. But the more brutal version is that they may have built a marriage where both people are waiting for the other to become someone they are not. Rebecca may want Zied to provide constant reassurance in a way that makes her feel emotionally safe, while Zied may want Rebecca to trust him without needing constant proof. Rebecca may want closeness that feels steady and obvious, while Zied may want independence that does not get treated like rejection. Neither desire is automatically wrong, but together they can become impossible if neither person knows how to meet in the middle. A relationship can die from incompatibility long before it dies from scandal, and that kind of ending is harder to accept because there is no single villain to blame. The cultural and religious differences add another layer because those differences do not disappear after the wedding. In the early stages of romance, people often believe love will be strong enough to handle everything later. Later arrives, and suddenly the small differences become daily negotiations. What feels normal to one person can feel restrictive to the other. What feels respectful to one person can feel controlling to the other. What feels like independence to one person can feel like emotional neglect to the other. Rebecca and Zied did not just have to love each other across cultures. They had to build a shared life where those cultures could coexist under pressure, and pressure has a way of revealing whether compromise is real or just delayed conflict. The religion issue also matters because it shapes expectations around marriage, gender roles, public behavior, family respect, and boundaries. Even when couples avoid the topic directly, it can still influence how they argue, what they expect, and what they consider acceptable. For Rebecca and Zied, those differences were part of the official conflict framing, which means they were not background details anymore. They were active pressure points. When religion and culture become part of marriage tension, the argument is rarely just about one action. It becomes about identity, respect, and whether one partner feels judged or misunderstood by the other's worldview. Then there is the issue of living separate lives under the same roof, which may be the coldest detail in the whole story because it suggests the emotional separation had already happened before any official decision was made. Couples can survive arguments when they still feel connected afterward. They can survive stress when they still seek each other for comfort. But once they start living like roommates who share history instead of partners who share a future, the marriage enters a much more dangerous stage. At that point, the question is no longer why they fight. The question becomes whether they still know how to reach each other when the fighting stops. Rebecca seemed to be fighting for connection, but connection demanded through fear can begin to feel like pressure. Zied seemed to be fighting for peace, but peace created through withdrawal can begin to feel like abandonment. That is the trap. Both people may be trying to protect themselves, but their protection methods hurt the other person. Rebecca's questions may be her way of trying to feel secure, but Zied may experience them as constant accusation. Zied's silence may be his way of avoiding another fight, but Rebecca may experience it as proof that he is hiding something. They are not just arguing about facts. They are arguing through nervous systems that no longer trust the other person's intentions. The cheating storyline made everything sharper because even an unproven accusation can change how viewers see the couple. Some fans immediately assume where there is suspicion, there must be a reason. Others believe accusation without proof can become unfair, especially when repeated constantly. The truth, at least from what is publicly verified, is that the show frames cheating accusations as part of their cycle, but that does not confirm every dramatic claim floating online. That distinction matters because the internet has taken pieces of their real conflict and attached bigger claims to it, including rumors about secret relationships, huge money losses, legal battles, prison, divorce, and dramatic punishments. Those stories may sound perfect for clicks, but sounding dramatic is not the same thing as being confirmed. This is where the story becomes more brutal in a different way, because the rumors around Rebecca and Zied show how reality TV gossip can mutate into something much darker than the actual verified storyline. A couple can have real marital problems, and suddenly, the internet turns those problems into a full crime saga with courtrooms, fines, prison sentences, secret lovers, and life-destroying betrayal. The audience consumes it because it feels exciting, and creators repeat it because it gets attention, but the confirmed record does not support those extreme claims. That means the real story is already painful, but the online version has been inflated into something that may not be true. And for a couple already struggling publicly, that kind of rumor cycle can add another layer of damage. The most responsible way to talk about those rumors is not to pretend they do not exist, because viewers may have already seen them, but also not to present them as fact. There has been online chatter pushing the story into far more extreme territory, but reliable sources do not confirm claims about a $300,000 fraud case, a $320,000 fine, a 5-month prison sentence, or an official divorce tied to those claims. That matters because Rebecca and Zied's real marriage problems are already serious enough without turning them into a fictional legal thriller. The verified tension is about distance, cheating accusations, culture, religion, age gap pressure, reconciliation without resolution, and a marriage that may be nearing its final chance. Still, the reason those rumors spread so easily is because they attach themselves to fears fans already had about the couple. From the beginning, some viewers questioned whether Zied truly loved Rebecca or whether the relationship carried an imbalance because of immigration, age, money, and opportunity. Those questions followed them for years, and once a relationship is publicly framed through suspicion, fans can become ready to believe almost anything that sounds like the final proof. That does not make the rumors true. It only shows how powerful the original doubts were. A couple that starts under public skepticism can spend years proving itself, but one new conflict can make viewers say they knew it all along. Rebecca's fear of being used has always been one of the emotional nerves of the story, and that is why the harshest rumors felt believable to some viewers even without confirmation. She had already faced criticism over trusting a younger man from another country, and fans had already debated whether love, loneliness, immigration, and insecurity were mixing in dangerous ways. For Rebecca, that public doubt must have been exhausting, because every struggle in the marriage could be read as evidence by people who never believed in the relationship. Even if she and Zied were simply dealing with ordinary marriage problems made worse by poor communication, the outside world was always ready to turn those problems into a verdict. Zied also faced the other side of that judgment because he was often viewed through suspicion before he even had the chance to be understood as a full person. Younger foreign spouses in the franchise are often judged through the same narrow lens, as if every emotion must be inspected for hidden motive. That does not mean viewers should ignore red flags, but it does mean the show's format can make people suspicious of cast members before the story has even unfolded. Zied's distance may be a real problem, but distance alone does not prove the wildest accusations. His frustration may be hard to watch, but frustration alone does not confirm betrayal. Reality TV often trains viewers to look for villains, but real relationships usually collapse in messier ways. The next brutal layer is that Rebecca and Zied may both be right about different parts of the same problem. Rebecca may be right that the marriage feels emotionally unsafe, that Zied has become distant, and that she cannot keep pretending the relationship is fine when she feels alone. Zied may be right that being constantly questioned makes closeness harder, and that he cannot feel loved if he feels treated like a suspect. When both people are partly right, the conflict becomes harder to solve because neither side feels fully seen. Each person waits for the other to admit fault first, and the relationship stalls in a painful contest over whose hurt deserves more attention. This is why their last resort storyline hits harder than a simple cheating scandal. A cheating scandal gives viewers a clear emotional script. Someone betrayed, someone suffered, someone gets exposed, and the audience knows where to place anger. But Rebecca and Zied's verified conflict is more psychologically messy. It is about the slow erosion of trust, the way insecurity feeds distance, the way distance feeds suspicion, and the way two people can keep returning to each other without ever repairing the thing that keeps breaking them. That kind of story is less flashy than a courtroom bombshell, but it is more relatable and maybe more disturbing, because many people recognize the pattern. There is also the painful question of whether love can survive constant testing. Rebecca may need reassurance because she loves Zied and fears losing him, but if the relationship becomes a test Zied can never pass, love starts turning into exhaustion. Zied may need space because he feels overwhelmed, but if his space becomes emotional absence, love starts turning into loneliness for Rebecca. Both people may be waiting for a feeling of safety that never arrives because their own reactions keep recreating the danger. This is the kind of cycle therapy is supposed to interrupt, but therapy only works if both people can stop defending themselves long enough to hear the other person's pain. The problem with defending yourself is that it feels necessary when you feel accused, but it often sounds cold to the person who is hurting. If Rebecca says she feels ignored and Zied only hears an attack, he may defend his behavior instead of responding to her fear. If Zied says he feels controlled and Rebecca only hears avoidance, she may push harder instead of hearing his need for trust. Every conversation becomes two people answering the accusation they think they heard, not the pain the other person is trying to explain. That is how couples can talk for hours and still feel like nothing was said. They are not communicating. They are surviving the conversation. The more brutal truth is that reconciliation without resolution can become its own kind of trap. Rebecca and Zied have apparently gone through distance, cheating accusations, and reconciliation more than once, but the official storyline makes clear that the cycle has continued without real closure. That means making up may have become easier than fixing the actual issue. They may calm down, reconnect briefly, remember the love, and choose each other again. But if the wound underneath is never healed, the next trigger brings everything back. A marriage cannot live forever on temporary peace. At some point, the couple either changes the pattern or becomes loyal to the pattern instead of the relationship.